I'd like to read to you an actual letter. It was written by a young Christian woman after she came to know Christ, and she wrote it to the person who had the most influence on her in her choice to become a disciple of Christ. This is an actual letter. She writes, "You know, when we met, I began to discover a new vulnerability, a warmth, and a lack of pretense that impressed me. I saw you a thriving spirit, no signs of internal stagnation anywhere. I could tell you were a growing person, and I like that. I saw you had a strong self-esteem, not based on the fluff or self-help books, but on something a whole lot deeper. I saw that you lived by convictions and priorities and not just by convenience, self-pleasure, and financial gain. And I had never met anyone like that before." She continues, "I felt a depth of love and concern as you listened to me and did not judge me. You tried to understand me, you sympathized, and you celebrated with me. You demonstrated kindness and generosity, and not just to me, but to other people as well. And you stood for something. You were willing to go against the grain of society and follow what you believed to be true, no matter what people said, no matter how much it cost you. And for those reasons and for a whole host of others, I found myself wanting what you had. Now that I've become a Christian, I wanted to write to you to tell you I'm grateful beyond words for how you lived out your Christian life in front of me." C.S. Lewis once said that Christianity is much more likely to be caught than taught. And that one statement has literally changed my perspective on what it means to live out loud. It has reshaped the way I preach. It has reshaped the way I study. And I long for the day that it will totally reshape the way that I live day in and day out. Now, why is this statement so significant to me, though it may not be significant to you? Because I always believed that evangelism, that sharing the good news of Christ, had to do solely with teaching. That's all. Now, don't hear something that I'm not saying. Is teaching important? Absolutely. The story of Christ must be told and retold again and again. But where do you start? Do you just walk up to a person on the street that you don't even know and begin to try to share what it is Christ has done in your life? Will they listen? Well, let me ask it this way. How much credibility do you extend to somebody who knocks on your door on Saturday morning and wants to talk religion? How much credibility do you extend to them? And you're a religious person. You're a God-fearer, I hope. How much credibility do you extend to them? The answer is little to none. People who cold call us on Saturday morning or any other day for that matter, who want to talk about religion, quite frankly, sort of tick us off. We don't like our Saturdays, our time off, our time with our family, invaded by somebody that we don't even know. Now, why is that? I'll tell you why. Why I believe it is because religion has so tainted and partially destroyed the pure desire to seek God in the hearts of many people. That makes me sick. It makes me sick. The people who really are seeking God, or maybe want to seek God, have this picture of religion, of what it means to be a Christian, that they either get from the fallacies of famous TV preachers or what they have experienced in their own background in legalistic church. I read a series of street interviews where the interviewers walked up to people on the streets of big cities like Chicago. Walked up to people they didn't even know and asked them essentially a couple of questions. Number one, what do you think church looks like? Or what does church look like? What does it mean to you? And secondly, describe the Christians, people that call themselves Christians, describe what they look like, what they live like, what they act like. Here are just a few of the answers. Well, church is where you go to hear about all the things that you're doing wrong. So they walk away with the accusing aspect of religion. Christians are the people who are always against stuff. Stuff like drinking and partying and abortion and homosexuals and on and on. A list of sins were listed. Church is where you learn about God, but you have to be all sort of solemn and stoic, kind of like you're at a funeral. Most Christians, some people said, are pretty good people. The ones I know are pretty good people, but I also know some one-eyed jacks. You know what that means, don't you? You see one side at one time and the other side someplace else. So they walk away with the inconsistency, with the hypocrisy part of religion. Are those all partially true or fully true? In some cases, yes. Are they excuses not to pursue God? No, but that's what people on the street typically think about church and about Christians. So why is it you think C.S. Lewis says, and I believe it's in the Bible confirms, that Christianity, that discipleship is much more likely to be caught than taught? I'll tell you why. Because most people watch before they listen. They want to see what it is you're about before they listen. Now, let's make sure we're clear. Are Christians supposed to stand against the things God stands against? Absolutely. The things that are sinful, the things that are hateful and harmful? Absolutely. We're against those things. But how do we get people to want to have a relationship with Christ? What part do we play in establishing the motivation, the positive motivation for somebody who does not yet know Christ to begin a relationship with Him? Do we beat them up? Well, there's plenty of that going around. If that's what you like, or if that's what people like, there's plenty of religious organizations that will beat you up week in and week out. I personally think that builds walls. What about by arguing and telling people what they're doing wrong? Well, there's plenty of that going around. Again, I say that builds up walls. I believe the Bible will confirm that the way that we influence people positively to follow Christ is we live out loud the changes that have occurred in our lives so that they'll stand back, as this girl in the letter says, and said, I want what you have. I want that. I want to be the kind of person that stands for something no matter the cost, no matter what other people may say. I want to have convictions that run deep and long and are immovable. We want people to crave what God has done in our lives because of the grace that He has already poured out in our life. We want other people to catch on. We want them to be infected as we have been. Because once they become hooked, once they are hooked, then they become a clean slate that God can write His teaching on. God will deal with the thou shalt nots, but He's got to hook them first. And guess who He uses to do that? He uses us. Now, if we are fired up about our relationship with Jesus, and I hope we are, why don't we in general, people in general, not just us, but Christians in general, why don't we share Him more? Well, there may be many reasons, but I picked out a few this morning that I call the falsums. You know what falsums are, don't you? The falsums, debate them. That's the only way. That's the way I was taught. Debate them. Get your facts together and then lance them. Tongue whip them and lance them with the truth. Now let's just stop for a second. Doesn't it make you just feel wonderful when you get to fuss, cuss, and discuss with a family member like your wife or your husband or your don't you just get it all warm and bubbly inside when you get to tag each other? I'm right. No, I'm right. Well, you remember back when, and we start dragging? That's so much fun, isn't it? If it's not, and you don't like that, imagine how people who don't yet know Christ might feel, or people who call themselves Christians but maybe believe differently than one group or another feel when we do that, when we argue with them and debate them and lance them. As though you just carved, and I've done this, you carved somebody up with the Word, and they're laying there, spiritually and emotionally bleeding to death, and they look up and say, oh, you're right, now accept Jesus. Yeah. That happens about as often as we get 2 feet of snow in Fayette. Which is not often. Maybe once in a while. We might outdo the Mormons on their door knocking. The Mormons know they get 1 out of 3,000 doors knocked. Maybe it's that efficient. We've got to find something much more efficient than that. We've got to find something that demonstrates God's love in such a way so that people will say, I want that. And how we do that is we live grace, because living grace has always been the best way to teach grace. Always. You live it before you teach it. And Jesus is the perfect example of that model. He models that better than anyone. Okay, maybe you're saying, well, it's not that I feel like I have to debate somebody or whatever, so that for that reason I don't share. Maybe you don't evangelize. Maybe you don't live out loud in such a way or share your faith with people in such a way because you don't think you're smart enough, or you don't think you're eloquent enough, or you think maybe you need to go to seminary, maybe take a witnessing course on the internet, or maybe you just think I need to sit down with you for a little while and imbue you with the principles needed to share your faith. And there may be some good things you could get from that. But I want you to know that God can use you as you are right now. Some of you are saying, no, you don't understand. I've got a track record a mile long, and I'm really an ineffective tool in God's hands. Let me tell you something. There is no such thing as an ineffective tool in God's hands. God uses no broken tools. He puts them back together before He uses them. You don't have to have a ton of Scripture memorized. You don't have to be a champion debater, and you sure don't have to have a pure record. God designed you and built you just the way you are to be infectious just the way you are, and you want to be infectious. Now, how do I know that? How do I know that God can take anyone who comes to Him and use that person, that man or that woman, that child in His service, no matter what it is they've done? Well, let me ask you a question. Tell me about this book that we claim to believe in. Is it a book full of superheroes? Is it a book? If the Bible were made up, as some people claim that it is, they sure did a poor job of editing. I mean, they did a crummy job of it. If I'm going to put together a book of superheroes, get the scissors out. I've got a lot of stories I'm going to remove from this. In fact, when I get through with this book, you'll have about 100 pages left. If this is a book of superheroes where all the men, all the women were unconquerable, where they vanquished every foe and never were defeated, then it truly would be a fairy tale. But what you have in your hands, if you're holding this book we call the Scripture, it is a book of people just like us. Just like us. Fallible, long track records of mistakes. Hadn't been to seminary. Hadn't been through witnessing courses. Totally untrained, except for one thing. They had the desire to be used by God. That was really that's the only thing they could put on their resume. You ever seen that deal where the resume is read out loud? The guy's applying for a preaching job, and down it says had a few years of experience, but been thrown in jail, been run out of town. He goes down this long thing, and the search committee says, "There's no way we're going to hire this guy. This guy's an ex-con." Excuse me, by the way, this is Paul's resume. The only prerequisite that you need to be able to be an infectious disciple is a desire to be so. That's it. And I know that's a fact because of what we have in John chapter 4, one of my favorites. We were talking about this on Wednesday night, and we're going through this series on Wednesday night of learning to be infectious disciples. And I couldn't get it off my heart, so I decided, hey, I'll just preach about it. This has been on my heart every day since Wednesday night, where we had a great discussion. This story you've heard before. You've heard many times. You've heard it from me. And I know you've heard it from other preachers because it's a popular preaching text. But when I talk about the woman at the well, and say, tell me some things about the woman at the well, what you'll probably tell me, number one, is of her sordid past. That's the first thing you'll mention. And if you're really insightful, you might talk about living water. And if you're really insightful, you might point out some of the cultural faux pas that occurred when Jesus had this encounter with this woman. But do you know about, and have you pinpointed the fact that in this text, God eradicates, He gets rid of all of our notions, all of our falsums about how we share? And are we equipped to share? Let's see if that's true. If you haven't seen it yet, you will. The text says, now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour, that would be about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God, who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Now, before we move on to the way that God eradicates all of our falsums, all of our preconceived ideas about whether we can be infectious disciples or not, we need to lay down the groundwork of what's happening in this text. Some things that aren't readily available until you do a little bit of study. These are the things you need to know. The text says Jesus had to go through Samaria. No, he didn't. Not had to the way we think about it. That's like saying, I have to go to Winfield, and so I'm going to go to Winfield by way of Jasper. That's the way Jews went through Samaria. They didn't go through it, they went around it. Horseshoe style. They didn't even want the dirt of Samaritans on their shoes. Samaritans, because Samaritans were half-breeds, and I'm using that the way they would. I'm not making a character judgment here. That's how Jews saw them. It goes back to Assyrian captivity, and these Samaritans were half Assyrian, half Jew. In other words, they weren't purebreds in the eyes of the purebred Jews. Women did not leave the house without an escort. If you need a clear example of this, just look at the Middle East today. They still practice this. A woman does not go out in public without a husband, preferably, an older son, a brother, some male escort. You don't go out by yourself. Men do not speak to single women. And what I mean by that is women who are alone. They may be single, they may not be, but you do not speak to them. That was highly immoral. This woman is by herself, which communicates a lot, at noon, which communicates a lot. They drew water early in the morning and late at night, but not in the middle of the day. And last of all, Jesus begins the process of addressing her needs, whatever those needs might be. So I ask again, why then did Jesus have to go through Samaria? Because no other Jew did. They went around. But the text says he had to go. The older versions say he must needs go. Which means in his mind he was saying, I have something to do. He had to go through Samaria because there was a woman there who needed potential unlocked, who needed her potential brought to the surface. This whole encounter took place because God could see what we so often fail to see. Let me say that again. Jesus had to go through Samaria because he saw something that we so often fail to see, and that is someone's potential, what God can do with them. Not what they've done, not their mistakes, not how awful they are, whether they're half-breeds or whatever, their potential, how they can be used by God. Let's finish the story. The woman said, Sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with, and this well is deep. So how are you going to get this living water? Are you better than our ancestor Jacob, who dug this well and drank from it, he and his sons and livestock, and passed it down to us? Jesus said, everyone who drinks this water will get thirsty again. Anyone who drinks the water I give will never thirst, not ever. The water I will give will be an artesian spring within, gushing fountains of endless life. The woman said, Sir, give me this water so that I won't ever get thirsty, won't ever have to come back to this well again. Just like the rest of us, this woman is firmly stuck in her physical needs. That's all she knows. Every day, she goes to this well and draws water in the heat of the day because she has to, even though really it's not her physical needs that are lacking, it's her spiritual needs. She is emotionally and spiritually bankrupt. And we're about to see why. Let me tell you something. She doesn't understand living water at this point. She has no clue about living water. All she knows is, I don't want to come back here again every day. So if you've got something that's going to provide water without me having to come here every day, fine, give it to me. And so Jesus does what nobody else can truly do next. He reads her mail. You know what that means? That's an American idiom. That means he saw right through. He knew if somebody reads your mail, they basically know everything about you. They can read your love letters and your bills and they know about you. Jesus cleans her clock. He sees straight through her. And here's what he says. I love the way he sets her up. He said, go and call your husband and then come back. I have no husband. She said, that's nicely put. Jesus said, I have no husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now isn't even your husband. You spoke the truth there, sure enough. I like that version. He cleaned her clock. He knew things about her that there was no way he could have known. He's never met her. He doesn't know her past. Even if he knew her a little bit by reputation, she sees that he sees right through her. That's what she knows. So, what do we do? What do you do when in a conversation all of your past mistakes come up? You do the only thing you know to do, and that is change the subject. Change the subject. Look at what she says. So you're a prophet. Well, tell me this. Our ancestors worshiped God at this mountain, but you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place for worship, right? Here's what she's saying. Let's leave my private life, my private business private. I tell you what. Let's talk theology. Let's talk worship. Yeah. That's it. Where do we worship? Because we Samaritans, we do it up here on Mount Gerizim, but you guys say down there in Jerusalem at the temple. Which is it? Isn't that how we react when we're confronted squarely in the face with our mistakes? We sort of get tongue-tied. Unless we're really honest and really humble, and most of us aren't, including me. Now do you see why this woman was by herself at the well at noon? She's there because she doesn't want to see her. She doesn't want to run into anybody. She doesn't want to talk to anybody. Here's a woman who is so thirsty that all she has done is try to quench her thirst with men. With relationships. And finally, it's like she gets to the point and says, "Phooey on marriage. I'll just shack up with this guy." Or maybe it was the guy. Maybe the guy said, "Man, this woman is tainted goods, but I'll tell you what, I'll take you to my house and you can cook and maybe bear some kids, but I'm marrying you." I don't know. All I know is she's there at noon. She's a woman. She's a half-breed. Let's just be completely honest. If we put it in our terms, she is a hoe. She's a skank. She's a slut. You call her what you want. That's who she is. Now that's how people saw her. Everybody except Jesus. Everybody except Jesus. If you don't like all those words and if that offended you, I'm sorry. She's a loser. Put it that way. That better? This right, kids? Is this the international symbol for loser now? But instead of hammering her with her mistakes, Jesus unlocks her potential. You know what? He doesn't go back to her relationships. When she switches gears and says, let's leave this about my past behind. Tell you what, let's talk theology. Where is it we worship? He goes with that. He doesn't go back. He goes with it. Listen to what he says. It's who you are and the way you live that count before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people the Father is out looking for, those who are simply and honestly themselves before Him in their worship. God is sheer being itself, spirit. Those who worship Him must do it out of their very being, their spirits, their true selves in adoration. I like the way that Peterson has this. The woman said, "I don't know about all that, but I do know that the Messiah is coming, and when He arrives, we'll get the whole story." I am He, Jesus says. You don't have to wait any longer or look any further. Here is the key to the entire lesson today. The question that you and I have to answer on a daily basis is this: what does the woman do with what she knows? Once Jesus cleans her clock and reveals Himself that He is the very one that she's been waiting for to, in her words, get the whole story or reveal all things to us, what does she do? Does she press Him for more information about why He's greater than Jacob? Does she go back and try to cram her mind with all kinds of Old Testament prophecy and analogy so she can figure out why Jesus is the Christ? Does she keep her mouth shut? After all, she's a loser. Who's going to listen to her? What is it that she does with what she knows? That's the question that has to be answered. What she does with what she knows in this story is proof positive that discipleship has to be infectious. What she does with what she knows is proof positive that discipleship has to be infectious. Listen to the rest of the story. Back in the village, the woman took the hint and left. In her confusion, she left her water pot, went back to the village and told the people, "Come and see a man who knew all about the things I did, who knows me inside and out. Do you think this could be the Messiah?" And they went out to see for themselves. Now, do you think this woman had any credibility with those villagers? Do you think they know her? Absolutely. What kind of credibility is she going to have? What kind of weight can she pull? She is the that woman of the Samaritan village. Every town has a that woman, don't they? And a that man. You know that woman. Which woman? You know and name the name. Oh yeah, that woman. Oh yeah, that man. That woman or that man comes with a whole resume of screw-ups and bad choices. And every town has at least one, sometimes several, but there's usually one. There was in my hometown of even 27,000 people. There was a that woman that everybody knew what she was like. How much credibility would she have had showing up on my front porch in Pampa, Texas? "I'd like to talk to you about Jesus." You? How much credibility does this woman have? Married and divorced, 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 living with a guy. Not very good. But what did she do anyway? When Jesus got a hold of her, when Jesus touched her life, what did she do? Did she make excuses? No, she simply did one thing. She didn't go to seminary. She didn't get a crash course on how to witness. She simply said, "Come and see." That's all she said. Come and see. Come and see a man who knows me inside and out. Now, what's the lesson? What should you learn? What you and I should learn is that our past mistakes and our inadequacies mean nothing once Jesus gets a hold of us. This woman isn't a scholar. She isn't studied. She's never been to synagogue, seminary. She doesn't know a thing. She does not know a thing about this man Jesus except that He saw right through her and claims to be the Messiah. That's all she knows. And she does not cower behind her inadequacies. She doesn't run and hide because of past track record. She goes out and says, "Come and see. Come and see." And they did. You know, that's the hard part for me. There must have been something different about her. I don't know if she, you know how we glow when we're excited. We glow when we have this freshness about our spirit. I don't know what it was, but here comes a woman that they see as trash, and she says, "Come and see," and they do. Now that's remarkable. There's something about her. There had to be some light in her face, some change in her appearance that would cause them to want to come and see. And what I'm suggesting to you is this: that same change, that same light, that same countenance is present in your face if you know Christ. If you will let it be. Now, what are you going to do? Do you think you have to be a Bible scholar? You don't. Do you think you have to have a piece of paper on the wall that says you completed a 12-week witnessing course? No, you don't. Do you have to be able to rattle off Scripture one after the other so you can pelt somebody with the truth? No, you don't. All you have to have is the grace of God living in you and a desire to say to somebody else, come and see. That's all you have to have. If somebody comes to know Christ because of an influence you had, it won't be because you're eloquent. It won't be because you're so talented and persuasive that they are just drawn to Christ. And it won't be because your life is somehow above reproach, that you somehow have lived perfectly. If someone decides to follow Jesus, it will simply be because God took the power of your invitation and did something with it. He's waiting for us to simply say, come and see. The end of the story is the best part. Many of the Samaritans from that village committed themselves to Him, to Jesus, because of the woman's witness. He knew all the things about all the things that I did. He knows me inside and out. So they asked Him, Jesus, to stay on. So He stayed 2 days. A lot more people entrusted their lives to Him when they heard what He had to say. They said, now this is key. Why would John add this? They said to the woman, who? The villagers who came to know Christ said to the woman, we're no longer taking this on your say-so. We've heard it for ourselves and know for sure this guy is the Savior of the world. I told the guys Wednesday night, you really don't pick up on it in English. But in this text, and in Greek in general, the main word for word is logos. We use it all the time in English with biology, and all the studies with ology on the end are words about something. And yet when the townspeople talk to this woman, they say, it's no longer because of your lelia, which is a lot like saying it's not because we believe in Him, but it's no longer because of your la, 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 la. In our language it would be yada 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 yada. No. Even at this point, they give her zero respect. Zero. But what's the end result? She didn't let all that junk keep her down. She went and said, come and see. And they did, and they believed. Your track record doesn't have to be an issue. Your ability to present in an Aristotelian lawyer-type fashion the 3 points of why you should be saved. You don't have to do all that. You simply have to, first of all, live the grace you've been given, and then say, you know, come and see for yourself. And it's in God's power that the change occurs.